I want to thank you for taking the time to attend today's presentation on MMIS management best practices. Without further ado, I give you Sarah and Beau.
Thanks, Keith, and thanks everyone for taking a little bit of time out of your Friday to join us for MMIS Management Best Practices. What workshop Elves need to know. Between Beau's experience as a senior consultant and BI architect and my background in supply chain, I think we have some really exciting stuff to share with you today, so let's get started. Yep. But first a little bit about RPI.
All right, so RPI, we are an Infor Alliance partner. We are specialized in Cloud Suite. We've had a few webinars on that this week. We're founded in Baltimore in 1999, and we have a nationwide practice of consultants spanning all aspects of the Infor Lawson solution.
And we're so fun. Just look at these pictures.
Yeah, we like to have fun with our customers.
All right, today's agenda. All right, we're going to talk through some of the basic MMIS maintenance struggles that we see all over the place. We'll get into the basics of MMIS management best practices, and then we'll move on to some great advanced tips and tricks, ideas that you can leverage to help maintain your item master. And then the special teaser that Keith already mentioned at the end, there's always one more present, so stick around to the very end.
Gosh, I kind of feel like if every MMIS team had a Buddy the Elf, it would just run so much better. Right? How can you take something that's tedious and make it fun? And I think we need to go off this slide, though. It's a little crazy.
Yeah, his face is a little much. Moving along. So I think one thing that's helpful is so many of the folks here at RPI come from an industry background. I know myself, once upon a time, was an inventory control analyst, so we know these struggles that you're dealing with intimately. We've tackled these problems ourselves, felt the frustration. There were definitely some days where I felt like item master maintenance was making me look like our friend the abominable snowman here. So let's just go over some of the common problems that we see across customers.
Absolutely. So we've got, we all know that loss in the item setup process can be pretty involved. And it's pretty easy to lose sight along that process and end up with incomplete setups. So maybe we have our IC11, but we downstream some of the other aspects just got missed. Hey, we're all busy. We get interrupted when we're trying to do something. So we have those incomplete setups. We also have, it's pretty intensive to try to make sure when we're adding new process items, we want to make sure they get in there for our users, but we end up with duplicate items. So that's another issue we run into. Manufacturer codes is another one that's really tough. We have a lot of customers, they end up with duplicate manufacturer codes. And it's just, some of that's due to just true duplicates, some of it's due to acquisitions and whatnot, and just keeping on top of manufacturer codes can be challenging at times.
Right. Sometimes if you don't search the manufacturer name the right way, you think it doesn't already exist, you add it again.
Exactly.
Item description chaos. So naming conventions are really important, but not everyone's using them or using them consistently. Maybe you're not using an adopted list of standard abbreviations or using those consistently. You can have inconsistent use of the description fields, particularly description 2 and 3 fields. Sometimes you just haven't worked out, all right, how do we want to use these across the board, documented that process and made it standardized. And special characters. We all know this is a big thumbs down. I think it comes into play when people think maybe it's just the best, easiest way to add a particular descriptor in there, like quotes for inches or things like that. They don't necessarily understand all of the problems that you can be creating downstream with things like reporting and whatnot. Yep. And also unit of measure woes. It can be difficult to build out your full unit of measure tree.
There's really value in doing that, though.
There's so much value, so you shouldn't let that stop you. Now, you may have someone at your organization who thinks, what's the big deal with all of this? So our item master isn't perfect, but it's not really causing me any problems, and I don't have the time to go through and do all of this cleanup and maintenance. I don't get it.
It's a big pet peeve of mine. So my background has always been reporting and analytics. And people, they want to have good reporting. But the problem is if your base data has bad data in it, it's really tough to deliver a good reporting solution. So we'd always push back, and you can account for it. You can put a lot of extra work into reporting and account for bad data. But it's really better, just go back and clean it up. And then there's the procurement consequences. There's, aside from just delays in getting product where it needs to get there, how much extra work are we putting on our buyers? Dealing with cost messages. If we can make sure everything's in there, where our pricing is right there where our contracts are, we have good agreements, we actually have PO 25s for all of our items, we're going to be in so much better situation. We're going to be wasting less resources and focusing on the important things.
Because apart from just the MMIS staff time and energy, you can have things like wasted warehouse space.
Such a premium these days.
So you're not only maintaining items that are obsolete and not necessary anymore in your item master, they're also taking up really valuable space in your warehouse. I mean, no one has enough space for product in healthcare. So you want to make sure that you don't have something sitting on the shelf tying up dollars that shouldn't be there.
Well, plus you're managing products that you don't need to. It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. All right, so how did we get here? I know everyone's probably eager to move on to the fancy tips and tricks that we have for you today, but knowing what the root causes are of some of these problems is just as important, if not more important sometimes. Those who can't remember the past are condemned to repeat it, right? So let's just take a minute and talk through some of these common causes before we move along to the exciting stuff.
Right. Well, everybody has a process, right? It might not be documented, it might be not consistently followed, but there is a process that everybody is following today. What's really important is going back, reviewing that process, making sure that it is well documented, because we're always going to have things like turnover. You're going to have people that need to fill in. Having your item creation, just all aspects of your MMIS documented, going to make sure we don't get back in the situation. Because again, we're going to show you some tips and tricks on how to clean it up, but it all comes down to process.
Right, exactly, which is why this is in bold here, because making sure that your processes are solid and adhered to can save you from some of these other pitfalls. It helps with department turnover and training gaps. Some of the other root causes here are not implementing changes to standards retroactively. So maybe you've really cleaned up your process, you have a good idea of what you should be doing and your best practices going forward, but you don't go back and you change all of your existing items to fit that standard, and that's really important. You might be missing the forest for the trees, just kind of these items jump up in the middle of your workday and you're addressing them one-on-one, not pulling back to see, is this a more widespread problem? Could it be addressed with an initiative within the department, ultimately saving more time than trying to troubleshoot these things one by one and resolve them one at a time on a basis like that.
Absolutely. So then, of course, layer onto all that, we have acquisitions and trying to merge processes when you have those acquisitions. And I don't know about you, a lot of us are in healthcare. We never have these vendor manufacturer mergers. It's not like we're dealing with these every single week, right?
Ha ha ha. All right, so know the basics. It all starts here, right?
Yep. So we're going to start. We all know the drill. Everybody knows this. It's not. This isn't rocket science. We're going to build our IC11, and it cascades out. When we look at what we're actually doing here, we've got about 5 or 6, depending on your setup, 7, maybe 8 uploads that you need to do. Buddy the Elf would love this. It looks like a Christmas tree.
It does look like a Christmas tree.
All right, cool. So how do we manage this process? We talked about all these different things we're trying to do, right? And it's easy to get interrupted. It's easy to get caught up in that process. So how can we clean it up?
I'm glad you asked, Beau.
All right, so I don't know how many of our customers are familiar with the self-contained workbooks that Don Peterson put out. Don Peterson's, of course, with Infor. And what this is, it's really a way to enhance the functionality of Microsoft add-ins. So what it allows you to do is it automate and string together multiple add-in queries and uploads and kind of create a defined process around it. So this is an example of a custom solution that we built for a customer to help them manage their item add process. And if we move to the next one, we've actually got a little video because it's cool to see it, but this is doing something.
Yeah,
there's some automation at work here.
Really cool. You guys have got to see this in action.
Okay, so what we've got all of our items over here, our item information we're going to add in, but for this particular customer, they already have a add worksheet that they're using, right? We don't want to disrupt their process.
And I think most customers do.
Exactly. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We can bring in their current sheet, their add sheet. This is what they're using today. They have different departments that are responsible for populating different fields in here. And all we're going to do is we're going to map this over to our self-contained workbook. We've got a button here. We're going to pull data into the add sheet, and it's going to populate all that over, map it into our workbook. And as this scrolls over, what you'll see is we have everything we need for our individual uploads. So our IC11 upload, our PO13 upload, PO25, and then our IC11.1 and our IC12.1 and .2 uploads. All the fields are there. Then up top, we've got some criteria we can set, like maybe it doesn't make sense for these items. We're not adding non-stocks to IC12, so we can turn that off and on here. And then here we've got, if we are building for multiple locations, why do we need to do separate uploads? Let's put in a list of all those locations and then have our automated process iterate through all of them. And we're going to do one click. We just clicked upload there. And what you're seeing here, these are actual uploads that are occurring to Lawson. And then Logan, can you pause this now? Because I don't want this to go away on us. Thank you. So what we got going on here, and actually I want to touch on something. A lot of our customers, we recommend that they use auto numbering for your IC11 ads. And that's great, but it's kind of painful for your upload process.
Right.
Because you do your first step, which is upload your IC11, and Lawson doesn't tell you, or add-ins doesn't tell you what the item number is that it just created.
It doesn't return that new value. And let's say you're adding 200 items in a mass upload.
That's a lot of work. So what this tool is doing is it first does your IC11 upload, and then it goes out and it queries and gets the item for that line. Returns it, pulls it into the sheet, and then uses that for the rest of your uploads. So now we've captured the item number that we just created. It's going to create your PO25 now. Next, okay, we're good. It's going to create your PO13 on and down the line, and we have a single process. We get all the same feedback that we're used to getting in add-ins, and we can let this process run through. If someone comes up to our desk and interrupts us, it's okay. The process is followed through. And if you have an error anywhere in the process, the downstream actions for that line are going to abort, and it's going to let you review that. So you can go back, work on the issues. Really cool. I get excited about the self-contained workbooks. Lots of things you can do with them. And this is just one example.
Absolutely. And I'm sure everyone out there who's responsible for new item ads at their organization knows just how huge this is.
This is really exciting. How do I get a hold of these?
It's something that we can help customers with. We have this that works out of the box. Probably for a particular customer, we really want to review their process and understand, hey, what do we need to tweak? Because again, this is all customizable. The fields that we're pulling in, the screens that we're doing uploads for, we can build these to match what their process is.
Or if you have your own VBA wizard at your organization, you can take the existing self-contained workbooks and set them loose.
Run with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because again, we're just building on what the kind of the framework that Don Peterson put together.
Absolutely. All right, item descriptions. So you want to adopt some naming conventions. Step one is have them. It's so important. You're going to want to move from the general to the specific as you go along into the description. Don't use slang. You may have some people out there in the clinical area who are like, why can't it just say Chuck's in there? I think...
Fight it.
Right, yes. Fight it. Well, we have an answer for that a little bit later. And also, again, back to the don't use special characters. Abbreviations, you want to adopt a standard set of abbreviations. And the synonyms and keywords here is where you can consider incorporating Chuck's and mapping that to, what the item really should be called so that your requesters can find that stuff more easily. And maybe they can even use the terms that they're used to when they're, talking to other people about ordering these items to find them when they're
That's
placing those
the right
requests.
way to do it. I mean, we want to accommodate that, but it should not be in our main description fields. So description 2 and 3. So description 3 is a new field for loss intent customers. It's 256 characters. How long have we been asking for that, right? So a lot of customers haven't really adopted it. It's there. We know it's going to be powerful for our end users, but where do we get that? And we have some tools for that. So a lot of you already have access to third-party tools like GHX Nuvia, DataLynx, and there's a ton of other ones out there that help you with item cleansing. And they have those long descriptions already. And it's such a quick and easy win to let them feed those to you, get those in your description 3, and start using them. And one of the cool things you can do with that is you can actually use description 3 for your as a search criteria for RQC.
Exactly. So let's take a look at what that looks like.
All right. So here's a typical item. Screws, surgical screws are a good example because there's just so many descriptors and there's only so much you can fit into that description 1 field. And you can see in description 2 here, we've added a couple other descriptors, but check this out. We're going to pull in description 3, and this came from Nuvia for this item. And you can see, look at all these. If we're able to keyword search off of all of these terms, this is going to give our requesters exactly what they want. So really quick and easy win, quick to deploy, and your requesters, they're going to notice it right away.
And we'll round out our coverage of the basics with units of measure. You want to build out the full unit of measure tree. Might seem like a pain, but among the many benefits is ease of future changes to the purchase unit of measure, reporting ease and accuracy, and also the ability to have a more accurate reflection of stock on hand. If you only have box or case built in the system and you have partial boxes or cases out there in the warehouse, you're not able to truly provide an accurate reflection of the stock on hand quantity to your inventory control specialist and anyone in MMIS management or your requesters.
Well, let's be honest, your requesters, they're more familiar with some of the UOMs than we are. Getting them all in the system is going to make it more relevant for them. They know how they use it. They may not care how we buy it. So let's get all those UOMs into the system for them.
You want to stick to 1 abbreviation per unit of measure. There really should be a 1-to-1 relationship. You want to avoid having multiple tracking flags. You just want to track it by 1 unit of measure. And you also want to avoid multiple units of measure with the same conversion factor. You may think that you're doing something helpful by having more than one out there, but the manufacturer has a set unit of measure structure for each item. The suppliers respect that, and you should too. So now we're going to advanced MMIS, some of the more exciting pro tips and tricks, but we're going to be staying on unit of measure for the beginning of this section here.
Yeah, so we'll talk, we've been focusing a lot on process, right? So how do we go back? We've got a good process now. How do we clean up the data that we've already got? Because sometimes we inherit a mess.
Yes.
So we're going to look at kind of a cascaded level of sophistication as we do this. We stuck with this one because it's a perfect example of where we can make this process a lot easier. So of course, we could go and do an add-ins query, and we could pull in all of our unit of measures into IC11. But as you know, we have up to 10 unit of measures per item, and then there's like 7, 8, I don't know. There's a ton of descriptors. You have your primary buy flags, your transact flags. So if you want to do a true unit of measure analysis, we're talking about bringing in like 70 fields,
so many fields
into an add-ins query. And of course, we can do it. I've done not that crazy. And then you can do a bunch of Excel formulas, and you can do, but you're going to go gray really quick.
Yeah, it's painful. You'll be doing it by brute force.
I like that.
Nobody wants that.
So we can do the same thing we're doing here. This is just a crystal report delivered through LBI. A lot of our customers have LBI, and we can do a quick UM analysis report. And some of the things we've touched on, we're talking about here. So we've got our pack string, our UM tree, right there at a glance. Every single UM that we have built in Lawson is there to see. Do we have duplicate units of measure using the same multiplier? It's just a yes/no flag. Flip it to yes and look at all your opportunities. Same thing with the duplicate tracking flag. And most importantly, the ability to see all of your UOMs, including the ones, if you go over here to the right, all of your UOMs on the agreement, all one screen. So again, we're getting away from doing this manual pull, and we're just looking at the relevant data. So that's a step in the right direction, right?
Yes. And back to our descriptions, I think, again, we recognize that the industry was asking for a long time for a lengthier description field, but then, we got it with description 3, and not everybody quite knew what to do with it, so it's important to, adopt these standardized practices for the description fields. What we see a lot of people doing for their standardized use of description 2 is to document the unit of measure tree data there. And we think that that's a good idea, but
it's
you
out
have
of
to
date
remember
as soon
to
as you
change it
upload
every
it.
time. Exactly. Yeah. So, anytime you go in there and you're changing the actual data in the IC11 unit of measure fields and those flags, you have to remember to go into the description 2 field and change that also. And that's so easy to forget. And, you can have tens of thousands of items in your item master, and it can very easily get out of control with, inconsistent data between what's in the description 2 field and how that unit of measure is actually set up.
Why are we going to manage this manually? This sounds like a super easy IPA flow that we could just go through every single night, look at all of our UOM fields, and update your description 2. It's like, well, let's not even think about it. Let's have it there, and let's make sure that it's relevant and it's accurate.
And it's an easy flow to write, right?
It is. And I think that there's so many opportunities like this in the supply chain spectrum where we could just spend just a little bit of time, build an IPA flow, and really improve our processes.
Absolutely. Yeah, leverage that IPA. Think a little bit outside the box for what you're used to using IPA flows for, but make them work for you. You just set this up to automatically run every night, and then that description 2 information that's showing up for your requesters, and even for you for managing the unit of measure and keeping track of all of that is absolutely current, to within 24 hours. Pretty awesome.
Why is Santa buying toilet paper?
Well, he shouldn't be.
Okay, how are we going to keep him from doing it?
We could use class codes. So maybe some of you thought that class codes were made obsolete by unspec codes, but they can still be used to provide some value. You can restrict items by requester, and you can restrict purchasing by buyer. There are some interesting things you can do here. Maybe you don't want anyone outside of facilities buying toilet paper or requesting toilet paper, like Santa has done here. So, that's a potential example for a good use of these class codes. And if they did try to request it, they would just get this little dialog pop-up box that tells them no.
Yep, this is right in our QC, so if they don't have access, and we're not talking about adding class codes for all of our items.
No.
This is a very targeted approach to meet a business need.
Absolutely. Another idea is you could use a class code to indicate a substitute item when the substitute has a different unit of measure than the original unavailable item, because that unit of measure difference would prevent you from using the dedicated field for that purpose. All right. So you not only want your item master to be clean, you want it to be lean, right? You don't want to be maintaining items that no one's using or no one's ordering. So it's a good idea on a regular basis to go through and take a look at items that haven't been ordered since they were added, and also to keep up with your inventory obsolescence. So there is an obsolescence report, IC227. Really simple. You're just going to set up your last issue cutoff date, and it's going to tell you everything that hasn't been issued out since then. So you can make this part of your month-end process so that you're reviewing it on a regular basis. Unfortunately, there isn't anything equivalent for last PO date, but it would be really easy to come up with a custom crystal report to give you that information, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. So you would want to review both of those, and you're going to want to develop a process around how you want to work your obsolescence. It does get a little bit tricky resolving that stock on hand, so you would definitely want to build out a process beyond just running this report and analyzing it to determine how you're going to resolve all that product.
And you're always going to have those items that, you know, even though there's no usage, you have to hang on to for emergency situations. So what's, you know, I mean, how can we flag those to know so we're not looking at them all the time?
Exactly. So you're going to have sometimes these items that will show up on your obsolescence report, but can't be removed from inventory because of their criticality to patient care. I remember when I was in inventory control, there was a solution that fell under this category. It didn't really get used very often, but when a patient was on it, it got used just gangbusters. We never would have been able to keep up with ordering it non-stock. It had to be on the shelf so that, you know, when a patient was put on it, there was a sufficient quantity to care for them properly. So we would recommend maybe flagging those using an item attribute so that you know, and you know, God forbid something happens to you tomorrow, or maybe you get a promotion, you know, and you don't think of this when you're training your replacement. You have that flag in there to kind of let the person know what's going on with the item, so you're not removing anything from inventory that really needs to be there, even if it looks obsolete.
Yep. Absolutely.
Oh,
all right. Whoops.
Wrong way. Sorry, guys.
All right. So we haven't really touched on duplicate items yet, but you know, one way to look at it is looking at your duplicate manufacturer item numbers, taking that extra step of trimming out some of your special characters, because sometimes we have a misplaced dot or dash and it's still a duplicate item. So taking a look at that. Now, what I will tell you, this might be a little bit of a hint of what's coming next. This may or may not look familiar to some people. What we're actually looking at is a burst report, a very simple one, with a nice KPI up on the top left, and then some detailed data. And should we go into what our surprise is?
All right, it's time. This is the one more present part.
All right, so for those of you that were at Inforum, or maybe brought back feedback from those that were at Inforum, there was a lot of talk about Burst. Burst is the new analytics platform. It's replacing Infor BI. So we got excited about this. We've been involved, and we started building out some solutions in Burst for supply chain. So what we're looking at here, this is a Burst dashboard on item master management, really. So what we're looking, we have some key KPIs up here. We're looking at how many active items we have in our item master. And then at a glance, what do we need to know about those items? How can we go in and fix some of these problems? So we can go in and we can look at how many of those 48,000 items are missing PO25s, right? How many of them are missing PO13s? And you see we've got some indicators. We're doing great on PO13s. We're only missing 35. Sounds like an easy thing to go in and clean up real quick.
For sure.
We got a little bit more of a challenge there around PO25s, and we need to fill that in. And we can go in and look at this. So let's take a look at those PO13s. Go in. Now we've got a dashboard that breaks this down for us. Here's all of our items that we're looking at. We have it broken down by a couple ways. This is looking at it by manufacturer, and in this case, we're also missing the manufacturer code for these items. And then we can also look, this is a running trend we have down on the bottom left, for these missing PO13 items, when were they added to IC11? So maybe we can go back and look at our processes and see from a timeline standpoint if our process improved at a certain point.
Right,
So,
maybe there was one mass ad where these were missed, or maybe someone was filling in for someone else, didn't really understand the process.
absolutely.
Really helpful.
All right, so what else can we do this? This is an interactive dashboard, right? So we've got our list of items down here. Another thing that's really cool is we can look at our 12-month rolling ads, and we can layer on different things. So we can see 6 weeks ago, we added 120 items, and we did 28 different individual vendor touches when we added those items. So these are, because that adds to the effort, right? For how
sure.
much effort our team is putting into this. And if we have missing setups, we've been doing pretty good, but the other thing we're layering over this is our missing setups for each of those weeks. So again, if someone's filling in for someone else doing that product, we can really quick at a glance, we're gonna be looking at this dashboard all the time, and we can see where those setups are and hopefully catch them before we run into downstream issues like cost messages. So here's all of our vendor items. We can real quick at a glance see how many active items we have. And let's just look at one of these. Let's take a look at Stryker. We'll click on this. Oops, I meant to just click on Stryker. We'll do that. And we'll drill in, and we can see we've got 2,100 active Stryker items, no missing PO25s, no missing PO13s. We do have 5 cost messages though. Let's take a look at them. Go in, we got another dashboard here just for cost messages. And what it's going to show us is that detail around it. And what's really cool when this pops up for us, we're going to have some different visuals within Burst that allow you to better analyze your data. Oh, let's back up here. Always fun when we have some technical issues.
Why don't we take some questions while that loads?
Sure.
You had to threaten it, Keith. Look at that. It popped right up. So what I wanted to show you, we've got this nice tree view, and we can see which items, we're just looking at Stryker, but which items have the most cost messages, because obviously that's what we want to focus on first. So, yeah, did we have any questions come in, Logan?
We have a whole lot of questions. A lot of.
You want to wait till the end for them, or?
We're there.
This is,
Yep.
yeah.
A lot
there.
of excitement from the community here, a lot of common names from what we see on Guru. I think this topic a lot of people are passionate about, and there's a lot of cool solutions that you guys have brought up, but there's also some additional questions around process. One is situations where the stock unit of measure is not the lowest unit of measure, but you wouldn't want to track down to that lowest unit of measure. So like an example is bandages, and there's 50 Band-Aids in a box. So, what's the recommendation there to kind of help with that balance where, again, it is a purchasing system. You want to know how many are in there, but you don't exactly want to.
I think it's within reason. Obviously, bandages or
Right.
cotton swabs is another example. We're never going to put those each UNOMs there. So I mean, we say put all the full pack string, but it's obviously within reason.
Right,
So.
and if you need that for reporting, you can add that and then actually use the inactive flag, I believe it's 9, to help track that just for reporting purposes.
Absolutely.
We've also seen a lot of organizations utilize user field for that to help with the breakdown. So it just really depends on what the process is. But we want to be as reasonable as possible. You don't want cotton ball down to the each there. You want that bag as your lowest. Okay. How do you recommend completely cleaning the unit of measure? So in the example that you do have 2 unit of measures built, CS versus CA, and both are in there, like how do you recommend cleaning that up?
Well, I know we now have the option to inactivate them. So we may not be able to remove it because there is activity. And of course, we can't fully remove that, but we can at least inactivate a UOM so that we don't have further activity
Right,
down the line.
and it's why it's so important to understand why you want to avoid adding those in the first place, because once they're in there and established, it is not a simple matter to get them out of there. If you really did want to truly remove them from the system, you would have to go and clean out every instance of it basically throughout the system, and
in
it's
some
next to
cases, you just
impossible.
can't. Exactly. What else?
We also, it's not necessarily a question, but there's a lot of interest in these custom self-contained workbooks. So, what's the effort for engagement to assist with, automating your processes using these self-contained workbooks?
It's a lot less than you'd think. Like I said, there's a little bit of VBA code, but a lot of the basis is already there. That one that we built, I think it was week before last that you brought that one to me for that item add process. There's probably, in what you saw there's maybe 7 or 8 hours worth of development at most. So these are very easy to deploy, very easy to go through a quick development and test process and get them out to be used.
And there are a lot of standard delivered
This is
ones
true. So I
from
think
Don
there's
Peterson.
Don pre-delivered, and these are available out on Infor Extreme. About 148 different workbooks across the different business units. And a lot of them are, like when I build one, I typically don't start from scratch. I'm typically taking something that Don built and then just adding on to it.
Yeah, so start there and then, run with it, or have us help you out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one last question here, and a little bit challenging, so I can't wait to see how you guys answer this one. How does this self-contained workbook compare to how contract management adds items?
Oh, so our self-contained workbooks and our spreadsheet designer. So spreadsheet designer is really cool because it has more flexibility than add-ins does. That's something that I think we're exploring right now, because while it has more functionality than add-ins, I'm kind of sad because some of the things that we're doing with the self-contained workbooks may not be available there, but we're actively kind of trying to figure out how to replace this functionality with the self-contained workbooks. So I would say if you have any questions about that, let us know, or if you're interested. And as we make some progress there, we'd like to share it with the community.
And we're still at the beginning of the exploration of really getting into the full potential of these workbooks. We've built some exciting stuff, but we know that there's a lot more to come, and that will kind of inform where it makes the most sense to use these, right, as opposed to some of the other tools that clients may have access to.
Absolutely.
All right, I want to thank you, Sarah, Beau. This was actually a terrific presentation.